When selecting varieties of tomatoes to use in a fresh salsa, you can really go with any you'd like. Here I'm using some sauce tomatoes, some slicing tomatoes, and even some cherry tomatoes. I'm really just trying to get a good variety of flavor and color in my salsa. All of the fresh produce that I'm using for this salsa comes from Watley Farm in Topsom, including tomatoes, jalapeno peppers, cilantro, and fresh onion.
So the second recipe on the Harvest of the Month fact sheet is for fresh salsa. And salsas are a really great dish to prepare for kids in schools because it is pretty much something that most kids are already familiar with, and a lot of them already like it. Think about like chips and salsa at a restaurant, or salsa on a burrito, or a taco bowl. And it's also a really great recipe to use that features local ingredients. Pretty much everything that I have here is from Watley Farm in Topsom. Really the only ingredients in this that are not local would be the salt, which could be from the Gulf of Maine, this is not. And then your lime juice, because we're still not growing limes in Maine yet. But, so I've got a fresh onion, I've got some cilantro, a variety of tomatoes, and when you're thinking tomatoes for salsa, you want to think about tomatoes that don't have a lot of juice and seeds, because that's just going to result in a watery salsa. So I've chosen varieties that are either your sauce tomatoes, like your San Marzanos, or your kind of firmer slicing tomatoes. And then I also have this bowl of sliced tomatoes that's left over from a different recipe that I did today. So another really great use for if you've got like leftovers from a different recipe that maybe you sliced up too many, maybe you diced up too many, just chop them up and put them in a salsa and no one will know the difference. And then I've got a fresh jalapeno pepper here. You can either omit it entirely, you can use a quarter or half and keep the seeds in, you can take the seeds out. This is really whatever you think will be most desirable for you or for the kids you're cooking for. So for this one, I'm probably just gonna do about half of a jalapeno pepper because I think I'm gonna end up eating the salsa and I have no tolerance for heat, unfortunately. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slice up my tomatoes, and I'm going to start with the ones that I've already got kind of sliced up here. Let me get a better knife. This is the knife that I wanted. So, just going to do it kind of a rough, not going to overthink it. This is nothing fancy. This is salsa. It's all going to get mashed together in a bowl. It tastes amazing, no matter what your knife skills are. But this one's certainly going to be beautiful because of all of these really cool tomatoes. Like this green one. So tomatoes are pretty great because as far as fruit or vegetable, there's not a lot of waste. So if you buy 10 pounds of tomatoes, it's not like you're going to end up with 5 pounds of prepared tomatoes. You're going to end up with like 9.75 pounds because really the only thing you should be throwing away or composting is that. You can utilize almost all of the tomato, which is really great. So I'm doing like a quarter to half inch dice here. Not a lot of liquid coming out of the tomatoes, so it's going to be an extra soupy salsa, which is good because I don't want that. If it was looking like your tomatoes were too soupy and there was too much liquid in there, what you can always do is you can use like a slotted spoon or even a strainer. Just put the tomatoes in that strainer, give it like a gentle press to get some of that juice out. But this, I'm very happy with this. This is not only beautiful, but it's not very watery. So those tomatoes were a good choice. And then we've got our fresh onion. Fresh meaning it was harvested recently. So you can see it doesn't have that papery exterior. It hasn't had time to what's called cure or dry out somewhere. So it's fresh. It needs to be kept in your refrigerator and eaten, in a couple of weeks. It has a much shorter shelf life. But you can certainly use the dried onions too. This is just taking advantage of what's locally, seasonally available right now. And I'm just gonna do a real fine dice on these guys. I think huge chunks of raw onion in your food is one of my personal pet peeves. I don't like getting a salad and having, biting down on a huge raw onion and then that's all you taste for the rest of your meal. So I tend to go pretty fine on the raw onion in my salsa. Also, if there's anybody in your kitchen that wears contact lenses instead of glasses, they should definitely be in charge of doing the onions because wearing contacts makes a huge difference as far as making you want to cry. It's like a little protective barrier. Right, so we've got our onion. Next up, we have that jalapeno. So, stem it, cut it in half lengthwise, and this is when you would make the decision if you want to take the seeds out or not. I'm going to leave it in because I'm only going to use half of this. Man, strong. And I'm going to finely, very finely, because no one wants to bite down on the big jalapeno. Chop this up. Put it in there. Then we got our cilantro. And I typically don't pick the leaves off the cilantro. The stem is perfectly fine to eat, and it just seems like a tedious thing that's not really necessary. So we're just gonna rough chop this fresh cilantro. You can save a little bit if you want for a garnish, but not totally necessary. That's good. And then, get a little bit of a mess here. So we've got our tomatoes, we've got our jalapeno, our fresh onion, our cilantro, and now we're gonna do our lime juice, and I'm doing about half the recipe. The recipe calls for 5 limes. This lime juice, I'm not going to juice them by hand, so I just got this. It says that about 2 tablespoons equals 1 lime. So use your judgment, and then a pinch of salt. Salt goes a long way. I like to stir with my hands, but we're going to keep it as clean as we can. And that's your salsa. And you can see that some of the tomatoes are breaking down a little bit, which is just going to give it like a thicker, almost saucy kind of consistency, but then a lot of them are really holding their shape. So this is going to be a nice blend of textures and flavors, and this salsa is beautiful. It smells amazing. It's good to go right now. You can eat it, dip some chips in that. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it in plastic. I'm going to set it in the fridge at least overnight, and it's just going to taste 10 times better tomorrow after that acid of the lime juice has kind of like broken things down. Everything's kind of melded together. It's going to be quite delicious tomorrow. So that is the harvest of the month.